Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the very kind introductions. It's interesting, right? We talk of well-being. This panel had 7 members originally, came down to 6, and now we are missing one more. So the point I'm trying to make here is there is always something or the other that needs to be factored in when you do anything in life. Well-being is one such thing which we have, what would I like to call it, bucketed just in one phase, largely physical well-being and mental well-being. That's what we've been doing over the years. However, if you go back, has anybody seen the Berson model of well-being? Okay, I would request you to please take a look at it. It has 7 pillars and 24 components or tenets, basis which you could come up with what works for you. Not everything can be picked up, but it is a very interesting guideline. It's like, you know, when you get onto Google Maps, you say, I want to go from A to B, and you tell me what the direction is. It's like your compass, and you pick which way works well for you. So today we have a very interesting panel with a lot of experience here with us. And we're going to take their perspectives on a few questions, right? But before I get started, I'll give a small little story on trust and leadership, which leads to well-being, which is very personal to me. So please keep this just in this room. I have been a part of several organizations. When I say several, it looks several, but 3 organizations in the last 20 plus years, and largely into spin-offs. Right, that has quote unquote become my specialization of late. And when we spun off, that's when the Lehman crisis happened. Oh yes, we
Mr.
have it.
Sudhir, yes, Patro is here, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry.
You don't have to be. So I was narrating my story, so just be a part of that. And the Lehman crisis happened. We were spun off from a large organization because in the brokerage field, it's not easy to give, you know, a double-digit dividend to your customers, stakeholders, etc. So they said we're going to spin off the business. Essentially a loss-making business, carry forward of about a little over 400 people. Revenue is less than $1 billion. And at the time of spin-off, attrition was at 40%. Nobody knew what's going to happen to the company. Referral rates was down to less than 5%. Nobody ever wanted to come and join the company. And it's just that, and every single time you wanted to do something, there was always like, when will you turn profitable or at least break even? This is the first year, right? Then when the Lehman crisis happened or the subprime crisis happened, Lehman was one of our biggest clients. They went bust. Imagine what happens to us, especially when you're a startup in that sense. So the managing director then wanted to build more trust with the entire organization and got everybody together in a room. Largely the managers. He didn't limit it just to his directs. He got all the managers in. There were then about 41, 42 managers at that time. Everybody got in, and he's like, we have a situation. The situation is that A, we follow suit what the rest of the globes are doing because we were a GCC, that we sack people and we show that we are profitable and at least we keep our positions handy. 2, we had already committed to a girls' school, right? And it was the first of its kind urban residential bridge camp for girls. And should we continue to fund that? Because that is our giving back to community. We were grateful that, you know, we were not sold off and we spun off into an individual entity. And third was that we tell everybody to keep their jobs. We don't do increases for the next 2 years. We don't do fanciful family days and company days that we're all used to, and we don't do the giveaways. So it's a trade-off what you want to do. With the managers, first it was a blow. Some managers started crying, why did I move from a very stable company to this company? And then we said, all right, give it time, come back. And within 24 hours, we assembled again. And then we asked them, so what do you think we should do? I was surprised. Unanimously, everybody came back and said, we will take a pay cut. And we will not take a merit increase for 2 years. Don't let anybody go home. It didn't stop just at that. To add on, they said we will not do company days, we will not do family days, we will not do anything fancy. If you want to cut out on medical insurance a bit in those days, feel free. Keep everybody safe, and we will still be committed to our community commitment, which was in those days a little over 1 crore on an annual basis. And at that time, the CSR Act was not yet mandated. So the point I'm trying to make here is trust is important. You build trust with open communication, honest communication, and make it a two-way communication. The minute you make it top down, it becomes a little heavy. After that exercise, we were so inspired. We actually worked along with Kavi. I think in about 18 months, we turned our business around because everybody was working there as if it was their own company, right? I still remember the comment, like my dad used to ask, I used to work almost about 18, 19 hours. He's like, you're HR, right? Like, yeah. Why do you need to work for so many hours? I was like, Papa, it's my papa's company, so I am going to work like that. And that's what everybody did. So if you build trust in people and you actually show them that how we are in this together, have a very balanced viewpoint, it essentially helps a great deal. With that, I'm going to go on with my first question to Dhruva you. Technology's role in promoting inclusion and well-being. How do you think this can actually work in today's world? And without overwhelming people, right? There's a lot of tech over there, and at times it's also there's this fad that, oh my God, there's FOMO. I don't know what's this app, right? And then the others, what do you think are some digital tools or platforms that will help you measure mental health, physical well-being, etc.? Over to you.
Correct. So I think technology is always an enabler. I think when we talk about inclusion, it needs to start with design. So I mean, designing benefits for everyone, and and all of those needs are vary a lot, right? So I think it starts from there, and then technology can always be used to enable it. And technology, I think, solves for two things. One is access. So I think putting services, in your pockets in the form of a phone or an application. And the second thing, which I think how technology makes it easier for inclusion, is hyper-personalization. I think marketing companies have figured it out so well on how to, show us advertisements which we need and which we want. Why not do it with wellness, and why not do it with health? And I think AI has made that a lot more easier. So to be able to hyper-personalize and give, what people want, and that can vary with age, gender, preferences. So I think that is very important, for hyper-personalization. And I think on measuring well-being or mental well-being, as you mentioned, I think there are some good research papers, at least that I have come across, which give some sense as to how you can measure well-being in a workplace. I think more than that, it's about sustaining it and ingraining it in culture, with time, that people become more aware about it, and us being as leaders, monitoring it and tracking it actively with intent is what matters more, when we talk about measuring it and when we talk about doing something after measuring it.
Thanks, Dhruva. Sudhir, can I ask you to add your perspective on this question?
Yeah. So, once again, and I was here since morning, but that's the Murphy's rule you have. But thank you for having me, and thank you for the question. Just to draw your attention, do you know who's Gaurav Makkad? Raise of hands? No? So he is, and please don't Google it right now, otherwise you'll miss the fun part. He's a ultra human, and they call it as quick 5 or 5-day champion. So what he has done is, when you say ultra human, it is about 10 kilometers swimming. Those who swim, you will understand what 10 kilometers swimming means. And about 180 kilometers cycling and 82 kilometers of marathon. That's what he has done. And same thing when you do it for 5 days, it becomes, your 5-day champion. So he has done it in different countries. So coincidentally, he was in our office. Now, why I'm saying this? So what happens is, wellness for different persona means very different things. So if you go and tell him do a health checkup, he may laugh in his mind, but he may not tell you. But we have complicated things a lot. Now today it's hard time for me to remember what does a Gen Z means. Every time I go back and check, which decade they fall into. But to simplify, we have young people, we have middle-aged people, we have older people. That's the simpler way of looking at it. All of them have very different needs, and we've been working together for ages together, right? So from a wellness perspective and measuring perspective, when you roll out programs, it's very important to look at what it is doing for that particular group, particular cohort. And before doing that, if you could develop a framework which is very, very relevant to them. For example, you may decide to draw a very, very vast framework, but when you go back, then there are business people who will say, where is the budget? Right? So that's a very, very good question which they ask. So it's always good to do a bit of a backtracking and mapping that, which could start from risk stratification for your organization. Typically, organizations are defined in different flavors of risk, which could range from a finance, legal, business risk, so on and so forth. But for 200 years, we have never defined it from a health perspective. The very fact that two of us are from health companies, is also a reflection that it's becoming important. It's also important that you bring in that aspect of risk stratification. And second, which is trending, is defining health goals for your organization and the respective employees. So some of the measures which they are taking is linking or unlocking your appraisal cycle only when you achieve the health goals. So that's something which is, happening. At HCL Healthcare, we have taken an initiative of launching a Green Apple Award, which means we'll reward people who have done excellent in achieving their health transformation journeys, which could range from multiple things. Being a health company, we have gone a little overboard, but you could define yours. So that's my 2 bit on this topic. We'll come back on this. Thank you.
Super. I like the idea of unlocking the performance appraisals only when the health goal is met. That is something I'm definitely taking back. I don't know how much pushback I'm going to get on that, but I think it's worthwhile. Sonali, my next question is for you. And that's specific to talent management and inclusive policies, right? What are some key considerations for developing inclusive policies that accommodate the diverse needs of employees? And how can flexible work policies enhance both inclusion and employee well-being? And what do you think that, if there are any challenges, what are those in implementing these?
Thank you. Well, I belong to an organization which is a Scandinavian company. So where, well-being of employees and work-life balance is, given importance to the, very high level. So coming from that, the philosophy of the organization is if you take care of your employees, the employees take care of the business. So, so well-being is part of the philosophy and the culture of the organization. So having said that, whenever we do, run for any kind of, initiatives or something, what are the key perspective which we take care is to understand what our internal demographics are, right? Without that, it's very difficult to understand of which gen employees are in the organizations and what are their needs. So once we understand that, so it's easier to classify and club it into different groups in terms of single parent, people with different abilities, children, and those who are into various groups like individual, they are just single, so these kind of classifications is easier to make. So once we know the needs of the employees and then it's, then we tailor make, whatever benefits we do or whatever initiatives we take, we tailor make for those kind of needs. So once we do that, then it goes to, employees from all these segments are being, we look at that aspect. Then the consideration which we always used to make, is it like equity or should we go in for equality, right? So with the so many diverse groups of employees in the organization, so we step in for more, equity, wherein, most segments of the employees can get benefit out of it, and they have something in it for them. So these are some of the few perspectives, but having said that, the other thing which we look at is, the legal considerations, because we are spread over India, Asia Pacific, and other European countries. So what are the legal considerations? Because some of the things pertaining to, paternity leave, then again, people with different abilities, then health and welfare policies for different, for legal considerations, we take that. And then we take a holistic, approach, wherein, not only the physical, mental, but also, financial well-being is being looked at, and also, the career well-being, which what I mean is that every step of the, where if is our, career growth plan is kind of very objective, and it's being transparent, whether they know how to step in and progress in their particular role. So these are some of the perspective when which we look at when we consider, any kind of talent. The second aspect you asked about is, how do you, second part of that.
How can flexible work policies enhance both inclusion and employee well-being?
Right.
And what are the challenges of implementing it?
The second part of the question is, again, how do you measure? We have already talked about how do we measure those. But, when you see year-on-year growth in your employee engagement and dip in the turnover. Other factors are, we have early adopters of tech. So where we know sentiment analysis of employees, then, the stress level of the employees and the work patterns of the employees. So this helps us to understand where they are and where we need to step in early and do some corrective measures and all. So, so these kind of things help us to measure where we are in terms of initiatives and well-being of the employees. And the challenges, like in anything, there are challenges which are, one is, first, the challenges like whether, in our mind, basically, whether we should go in for equity or whether we should go in for, equality. So these kind of things which we need to take, but with the diverse kind of workforce which we have, even globally we are, in so many different locations. So we definitely, tend towards more equity. Then how do we, in this diverse and the tech-driven organization, how do we have, because we have employees, we have different kinds of policies, like we have reduced work hours, we have compressed work week, we have, work from home and permanently work from home kind of thing and hybrid thing. So how do we have the team cohesion? So it is like we have started this initiative well before COVID. So now we have matured things where we have, weekly, monthly, collaboration days. Then we call in for specific, functions where they need to attend those things, and so on and so forth. So, so how do we, so the team cohesion is something which is very important for us to innovate. And then when we see that, the innovations and the patents are getting, more and more over the years, then it gives a kind of, to us a satisfaction that, we are going in the right direction. The next thing is, leadership buy-in, which is something wherein, in India and Asia Pacific region mainly, the leaders were kind of skeptic if we do all these kind of flexible things, whether this will help the organization in terms of innovation, because we are very innovative, innovating technology company. So will this help or not? So we do, small pilots, take feedback, then again re-implement it. And when leaders see year on year, patents increasing, innovation increasing, employee engagement increasing, and the turnover decreasing. So this kinds of, gives that we are in the right direction.
Thanks, Sonali. I'll tell you what I'm facing. Right? At my end, people are too good, okay? And they're so good that they want to work for the greater good. So even if they're unwell and they take off, like, all the great policies and all that stuff, they're guilty of being off. They're still connected to the network. If there is something, there's so much that's come in as part of asynchronous communication, right? You can work across time zones. And, when this happens, people still think, you can leave it in that and somebody from across the globe will reply to you. No, pick up the phone, let's get onto a call now. So even if I want to do a compressed work week or if I want to focus on their well-being, they don't want to. So with that, Sonali, I want to move on to Sanka. Sanka, I want to know your viewpoints on this.
So what you just touched upon, so I would like to be a bit more provocative in this panel discussion. I think let's step back. Why do we need well-being? Are we not responsible for all of it? Are we not responsible for our own well-being? We are discussing it primarily because India is at a crossroad. I think if you look at the country, we are an emerging powerhouse, economic powerhouse. All of us need to probably work hard, make compromises, sacrifices a little more than if we are in the Western world. Okay, so that's the primary fundamental. Now, if we have to make compromises, what compromises are we making? Are we making compromises on the productive work time? Are we making compromises on our own well-being, spending time with the families, etc.? What is it that is holding us back, right? So we are talking here something that balances both worlds. And every time there's a tilt of the balance to an extreme, I guess that's where we start discussing about the well-being. So that's number one. The second is the entire MNC culture. You look at the GCC culture. Okay, what is it that is they are developing? Okay, from an Indian or the world context. I think it's a great talent factory for the world. All of us sitting here in the GCC, or most of us are from the GCC world, right? We are producing the talent for the entire world. For that, I think being a productive workforce comes as the primary requirement. We are highly competitive. The MNC culture, the competitive spirit runs in the air. We have to spend more productive time in the offices. And therefore, there will be some compromises. And I'm setting that as an example because obviously, when I move to the well-being part of it, and that's the second part, is that when we are competitive, what is it that will ensure our safety inside the organization or the well-being inside the organization? I think it's all of us. We have to decide, where the line gets drawn. We have to decide what choices do we make. We have to decide where do we find the sounding board inside the firm. I think the talent management practices, as Sonali and Rajita spoke about, I think has to get aligned starting with us as an individual. Okay, the HR practices, the talent management practices, everything else falls in place from that. All of us comes from different generation. You look at Gen Zs of the world. Gen Zs of the world are more isolated. They want to be independent. They want to take their own decision much more than what at our time we would have taken. We would have been dependent on multiple factors. We would have looked at the struggling days and then taken some decisions. Here, I think the Gen Zs of the world, some of them are sitting here in the room. I don't think you really need to get bothered about that. They are very, very independent and confident. And I guess to your point, Rajita, I think we don't need to tell them what they need to do. I guess they are self-decisive. They are taking decisions on their own behalf. We don't need to tell them, you operate from offices or home or anywhere. You operate and be productive. And I think that's what people are all about. And that's what is going to decide, how well-being or productive we are as a country, as an individual.
Thank you. With that, Rekha, I want to move to you. Okay. I want to know, Sonali spoke of leadership buy-in. What are the most critical skills leaders need today to foster inclusion well-being? And how can leaders ensure that inclusion is not just a policy, but it's day-to-day, it's a part of culture? And then again, how do leaders inspire and align their work with the organization's broader diversity, equity, and inclusion goals?
So before I answer the question, quick question to the audience. How many of you work in a hybrid work model today, where basically you are going to office 2-3 times and the rest of it is working from home? Okay, so can I assume then the others are going to office every day? Oh, wow, okay. So it's mixed. I can see about 40-60%, right? Okay, and in a day, roughly how many meetings do you attend? More than 5? More than 5, yeah? More than 10? Oh, okay. No meetings? Anyone? No, we are not that lucky. Okay. So there was a study done recently where they compared the inclusion of people who are attending meeting in a hybrid work model. Okay, so when I say meeting in a hybrid work model, what was happening was some of the people were in office and some of the people were attending the meeting virtually. So you can guess, I think, as HR professionals, what the study would have said. The people who were attending that meeting virtually felt completely left out, right? Because I don't know if any of you have experienced this. I have at least experienced it many times myself because I follow a hybrid work model. So I'm in office 3 days a week and 2 days I work from home. And on the days that I am attending the meeting in office, suddenly, there are parallel conversations that are happening. Suddenly people walk, get up, they start walking around, right? I can see a lot of you nodding your head. So that's what you see. So imagine someone sitting and attending that call from their home. Half the time, they are not able to catch the conversation. Half the time, they are not able to see what is happening in the room. Suddenly, someone jumps up, starts using a whiteboard. They don't even realize that people on the call can't see what is being written. So there are some organizations who have actually brought in a policy that, hey, if you're doing a meeting, either do it 100% virtual or it has to be 100% in office. It's a very small thing to say, and many people may not realize it, but just look at the number of meetings we all attend in a day. And if you are that impacted person, do you feel inclusive? And do you feel belonged, right? And that is where leadership plays a very important role. So if you are a leader, you are a manager, and you are leading that meeting, are you sensitive? Are you creating that environment where everyone is contributing? Two, there are different human traits, human personalities. Some of us are more extrovertish, right? Some of us can quickly jump into a conversation and start contributing. Some of us are more quieter. And then you're also dealing with a multi-generational workforce, right? Across different generations. So today, managers or leaders are dealing with a very, very diverse workforce. And on top of that, you have post-COVID complications of this hybrid work model, the new normal, evolving normal, whatever you call it. So the leader's role is extremely important to, and I've just given one example, and there are many, many situations like this, but most important is that the leader needs to have that mindset to create that, inclusive environment. So it can't be a question of, out of sight and out of mind, right? It should be out of sight, but in the mind. Because today you have work from anywhere. So your employee could be anywhere, right? And one of you, I think in the earlier session, were talking about the importance of body language and those kind of things. Your team member is not even switching on the camera. What body language can you observe? What eye contact can you make? How do you then make that person inclusive in spite of, that kind of a scenario, right? So that's on the inclusive part. On well-being, let me share a quick example. And this happened several years back. This is all pre-COVID when all of us used to go to office every day. And I was working in this organization where my work day would typically start around 11 a.m. and would go on. I mean, there was no end, right? And the culture of that particular team was to work very late hours. And even I have been in office till like 12, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. and all of that. In fact, I actually had to move my home to very close to office because it was so unsafe for me to, leave the office at that time. On the days when I would set off or leave, at say 10 p.m., right? And my room was right at the very end of the corridor. So I had to walk the entire corridor to reach the exit door. You will not believe, at least 10 people would say, oh, half a day. Half a day today. Oh, you're going for some dinner or you have some event. So it was considered abnormal to leave, and that too I'm talking about 10 p.m., right? And that was considered like that. In fact, I don't know how many of you are familiar. This term is actually called as gaslighting. Okay? So that used to happen. So what culture are we talking about? And today in the news, and I don't want to name that company, but I'm sure every single one of you are aware of the incident that has happened, the scrutiny that is right there on toxic workplaces and toxic work culture. Now, who is the person who has to set that right? It has to be the leader. It has to be the manager, right? If the leader is able to set that right tone, automatically, and in these kind of things, no, there is no place for democracy. I strongly believe, and that's my view. There are certain things which are non-negotiable. You can't compromise on creating the psychologically safe space for your people, where if someone is unwell or someone is just stressed on a particular day or they're just not able to work, they should be able to take off and they should not feel guilty or think 100 times, oh, what's the impact going to be for my merit or my promotion? You know, what will the perception of my manager be? Now, if that manager or leader has created that kind of environment, then that is where the biggest challenge is. And as HR, we all play the most important role in keeping track or being aware of such things. And that's where trust comes into play, you know, like Rajita was started the session with. If your employees trust you, and if that environment of trust is there, then you will be able to break through such issues if they are existing.
Thanks, Rekha. Dhruva, would you have any inputs on that?
I think Rekha has put it quite well. And I think when it comes to, let's say, drafting inclusion policies, or when we talk about implementation of inclusion policies, I think there always should be a lot of focus on being able to iterate quickly. I think in today's world and the way it's changing and the way it's changing fast, you need to be able to iterate quickly. You can't have yearly revisions of policies, right? It needs to be in a shorter time frame. And I think another aspect would be is to leave some control or have some trust in your employees or in your team members to make that right decision for themselves. I think it can't be a one-way diction or a one-way street. You need to place some decision making in their hands for it to be truly inclusive. So I think that is what I would.
Thank you. Sudhir, I'm going to come to you now. How do you think organizations can track effectiveness of this, right? And can you share some examples of successful well-being or inclusion initiatives that have demonstrated measurable impact on employee engagement or retention? And I definitely want to know a lot more about the green apple also. So over to you.
Sure, thank you. And I think the discussion is going very interesting. And I would buy a little bit of provocation from Sankha, The wellness or well-being of employees, if the pivoting is that you're trying to, do something good for the employees, and I'm not a HR professional with that disclaimer, I may say that it won't work. It won't work if you're thinking that, you're trying to bring in that difference, because as Sankha mentioned very, very aptly, everybody is quite cognizant of their health, their wealth, their awareness around what's happening to them. So they are very, very conscious, aware individuals. Unlike in our days, I have a lot of gray hairs. So, but we were very hardworking, as Rekha mentioned. The people who were earlier very hardworking, we have not heard of these problems which we are hearing these days. And I was reading it. You would see how the complication of health has changed. Today, it's not dementia, it's digital dementia, right? And ironically, I was reading it on a digital platform. So and suddenly I'll see some of the mobiles dropping off. But it is a very, very serious thing, and it leads to cognitive decline. It leads to, social isolations, and loneliness is a pandemic in US. We are not very far from there. And did we ever had an issue of sleep 20, 25 years back? We were dead tired, just go back, whatever pillow and bed you had, you will get good sleep. But today we have that issue, it's a genuine issue, right? So it changes. And if I can just slightly detract and come back, fundamentally, and we touched upon in different aspects about it, in last 200 years, innovation has always been very exploitative and economical in nature. If you look at mechanics, steel, iron, hydropower, industrial revolution, electronics, and to the latest internet and digital, which we keep talking, only in last 5-6 years, we are talking green. Why? Because Newton's third law of action, every action has a reaction. So we've been taking, And now nature is telling us that you have to give it back as well. And that's why we are talking wellness. So now coming back to that, now wellness is impacting business in different ways. Some of it which my fellow panelists have spoken, productivity, absenteeism, and things like that. Now what happens is, it's very important, you all come from different organizations. It's important for you to contextualize it in your organization's, scheme of things. Depending on what kind of business you are in, what's your employee base, what kind of, work aspects you have. That way you could design it very differently versus company A, B, C. Budget will not be a constraint when you look at it contextually from that perspective. Second is, if you do not have a way to measure year 1, year 2, year 3, when you go to year 2 and you ask for budgets, you'll not get it. So it's very important that anything which you do, you should have enough data to back the ROI on wellness. That's very important. And you have experts, 2 of them are sitting in this panel, you can talk to us later. But having said that, it's very important that you should have data around that. The aspects on what can we do and how do we measure it, there are various ways, depending on what framework, basis on the 2 points which I said, you design your framework and you start your journey. For many organizations, wellness could still be luxury. For many organizations, it could still be a necessity. And like, we had Rekha mentioning, for many organizations, it is cultural. So it's like the epitome, it's zenith, you're already there. So there you would be thinking of very different levels of engagement. You would be looking at engagement metrics and not risk assessment. So depending on your organization strategy, philosophy, please contextualize it, have it data backed, and on leadership, if they are not in, and we have a lot of stories, whether it is a celebrity like a Siddharth Shukla, or we have an entrepreneur like Nitin Kamath. Nobody is untouched. So I think you don't have to sell it that hard, but you really have to paint a very good picture, and the leadership has to be in the game, and then, then the wellness story will fly. From a measurement perspective and inclusion perspective, we have done a lot of things from an on-site well-being perspective as we are speaking. Let's say you have in excess of 30% women employees, but does your program resonate accordingly? You may have different HR philosophies, policies, to support them, but do you have those programs at workplace or otherwise to support them? You may have mobility as an issue with a lot of employees. Do you have a caregiver at your premises to sort of support them? Have you really altered your infra in a way to support their movement, by the time they come from the car to their workstation, to washrooms, to cafeterias and things like that. So these are some of the aspects. But from a tool perspective, there are umpteen number of tools which can help you in terms of health risk assessment, pre, post, and you can do multiple things. And I don't need to really talk much about that, but I can assure you there are umpteen number of ways to measure the effectiveness of a wellness, but it's very important to design it in the first place, which resonates the purpose and business of your organization. That's my 2 bit on this.
Thanks, Udhi. Rekha, quickly your points on this.
So we were, incidentally having a conversation around this very topic, just in the speaker lounge, just before the panel discussion happened. I think we should leverage, AI. In fact, I've said the word. I think that this is the buzzword now. In fact, recently someone was saying that, oh, you know what? I was in a conference and we went half an hour without saying the word. So Rachita, finally, I had to say it. So I have actually seen this, very close at hand. There is tons of data available to us day in and day out. But the question is, how do you use the data? How do you make sense of the data? And how do you gather insights from the data? And that's where AI plays a very crucial role. There are several tools available, and I don't think we have the time to get into it. But whether it is in terms of inclusion or whether it is in terms of well-being, that's what we should be leveraging as HR professionals. I think, one of the panelists spoke earlier about hyper-personalization. And from a well-being perspective, that is the future. Many of us still are in the, same old 4 lakhs GMC, 5 lakhs GTC, 2 times CTC of this thing. That's gone. We really need to change it. You can't have a one-size-fits-all wellness solution. You are dealing with a multi-generational workforce which has different needs. Are you able to cater to all the needs of them? Are you able to cater to gender change operations? Are you able to cater to egg freezing? Are you able to cater to, adoption? Anything like that, right? So are you creating that kind of a culture? And for that you need data, right? So how do you use the data? How do you look at what the metrics are? How do you then take the right decision and tailor your solutions, whether it is well-being or whether it is inclusion? So are you aware of unconscious bias, which is creeping in and impacting inclusion and belongingness across the organization, across the entire employee life cycle? Whether you start with hiring, or whether it is performance management, or whether it is promotions, or whether it is growth for different groups, is there bias? It's difficult to measure, but you have data, and if you are measuring the data, if you're looking at metrics, then you get the insights which then help you understand, hey, there's an issue here. And as a professional, as a HR leader, I need to jump in and fix the issue. So there's wealth of data available. How you use the data, how you leverage the data, and then take the right decisions based on that is completely in our hands.
Priyanka, I would request you to bring us home on, while we've discussed everything, what do you think are hardcore real challenges and what should we do about them?
Yeah, very interesting question. I think that's at the top of the mind for all of us, I guess. The challenges. All this, what eminent panel members have spoken about our ideal world. We don't live in an ideal world. Okay, let's face it. Leaders will not look at well-being unless we are productive. Let's be absolutely fair. Productivity, performance comes first. Number one. Okay, so therefore, what challenges? So are they resisting it? All of us are leaders here in the room, right? Are we resisting it ourselves? We are not. But our priorities are different. Our priorities are of, being more productive. Our priorities are of getting the company, becoming more competitive, probably number one or number two in the industry. But at the same time, I guess it's important to put some guardrails around what shouldn't be done or what should be done from a people perspective. Ultimately, all of us are humans. We have behaviors. We have certain aspects, which makes us more productive, right? So, three important factors, Rajita. I think again, I'm being a little more provocative today. I guess the problem doesn't lie in any of us or in this room. It starts with the board level. Board of directors today are not only looking at productivity or hyper performance. They are supposed to, and the regulatory bodies of the government are driving that. They have to set very high ethical standards. The governance standards have to be very high. Leadership cannot escape that. The leadership, when they go and talk about productivity and performance, they are also answerable for any critical incidents, people-related incidents in the board, right? So that's number one. Board drives that. And that's what sets the guardrail for the cultural aspects in the firm. The second part, and I think that's very important, HR. I think HR has to ensure that senior leadership takes it very seriously. And how do they take it seriously? What is it that drives senior leadership? At the end of it, bonuses, compensation, how do we align that? Goals? Okay, link those to the goals. How otherwise you will differentiate a leader from other in a highly productive company? You are number one. Everyone probably have, as we say, 19-20 ka fasla from a productivity performance perspective. So the only differentiator is how people talk about it. How do they perceive about the culture in the firm? How do they perceive about the culture in that particular team? And how does the leader drives that culture in the firm? HR's role is pretty important. I think they should put it in paper. That's number one. Second is HR's role of creating some sounding boards. Create cultural committees, create councils for people to come together and draw that energy and strength from each other. I guess sometimes we are not able to speak up. It's not in the culture. I mean, we as an Indians, we always get that question from the Western world. You don't speak question in the open forum. And that's true. We are not. We are there to say yes to everything, that comes our way because we try. That's our service background. That's our orientation. That's what we have learned from our fathers and forefathers. So I think that's an important second aspect is how do we create councils and get strong leadership to drive those councils. I think once we have strong leadership in those councils, automatically the cultural guardrails are set and we have a better a follower from that cultural aspect. That's the second part. But the third part, I think I'll reiterate again, is about all of us as individuals. Nobody is going to give us that safety inside the firm. We are here in a competitive world. We have to live with it. We are in an economy which is growing extremely fast and we have to perform better than the other economies. And it's important that we all participate in that. Having said that, so who creates the safety for us? Do you think HR, leadership, board will create the safety? The answer is absolutely no. The individual, all of us, I, you, everyone, will have to create that safety. We have to start speaking up. We have to find sounding boards inside the firm if we are not allowed to. We have to exercise the option of saying a no when we have a concern. If you don't want to extend, if you don't want to work from office, I think we have an option of saying, no, we cannot work from home. We have to work from home or from whichever place. We have to be productive. That's it. And certain times, that may cause a problem. And I guess that requires a bit of a communication with your leader, with your managers. Your ability to articulate the concerns and problems and share it with the managers is definitely an important aspect. I think we cannot say that, okay, somebody else will communicate on our behalf. It cannot be. We have to create that communication and leverage that part of our relationship with our managers and leaders. And I think these are some of the aspects which is important. And sometime back in my previous organization, and Goldman Sachs, there was a partner who was traveling to Bangalore. I was in Bangalore office at that point in time, and he said, I know all of you work very hard. We work like 3 shifts. We follow, it's a follow the sun model, that we try to catch up with. And in India specifically, the work culture was very, very tough. And he said, see, if you work hard, the reward for good work is more work, right? So where do you draw a line? He said, the piece of advice that I give to everyone, and I want to share that with all of us today, is there are 3 pieces of advice. First is from a priority perspective, what is important to me? First is my own peace of mind. If that is not good, nothing in this world is good for us, right? So that's number 1. Second, he said, from a priority perspective is our family. We work for family and they have to be with us. So that is our second priority. And the third priority, he said, is the company itself, right? Whichever company we work in. That time it was Goldman Sachs. So if Goldman Sachs is not in the first 3, definitely that's not the company you should be working in. That's number 1. But the first 2, he said that your peace of mind will always outlast your family. Your family will always outlast the company or the workplace that you work in. And that stuck with me. We always put the company on top of everything else, and then we start blaming the culture, we start blaming the leadership and all of that. It never happens. It's on us. It's on us how we prioritize, how we want to be considered in the firm, how we want to spend our lives, how we want to be more productive. So the responsibility lies on us to a very large extent. Of course, there will be guardrails. Everyone from government to boards, independent directors, you look at HR, leadership, everyone wants to do something about the well-being of each of the individual. But hyper-personalization, honestly, I'm telling you, other than technology, it's highly difficult. We'll be like spending a lot of time, and whoever works on it, if HR works on it, HR will be extremely, extremely stressed out, and he will keep on complaining about that. it is our responsibility to a very large extent to ensure our own well-being.
Thanks, Anka. Sonali, I will come back to you with the first question. I know we have very less time. So it's on us, it's on you. The first question will come to you, whatever comes from the audience. On the dais. We'll take it offline. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, panelists, for this.